How's it going, everybody? I'm Jukebox Ginger. Welcome back to another episode of Singed Eye Sockets, a perception podcast where we discuss, cases and kind of change the perception on, the views and some of the facts behind cases, and kind of show you more than what you just see at the surface. And our guest tonight is going to be a huge example of a lot of those things. So I just want to let you know, first off, Jeffrey Deskovic, that I appreciate you coming on and reaching out to me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
So how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, I couldn't be better. It's been 100 and something degrees outside, and now I'm in the cold, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, I hear you. Listen, I'm happy to feel sun on my face and fresh air and be able to be outside the nighttime and freedom of travel.
Yeah, I mean, you had a hell of a life, and or lack thereof, based on certain circumstances. So let's start out with telling everybody what you do now.
So I'm a lawyer, and I run a nonprofit organization, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which I founded. We have as our mission freeing people who are in prison for crimes they're innocent of. And we also do policy work aimed at preventing those injustices in the first place. So far, we've gotten 14 people home since opening our doors back in 2011. And we've also helped pass 3 laws and another 6 as key members of a national coalition group called It Could Happen to You. I have a master's degree in criminal justice. My thesis is written on wrongful conviction causes and reform.
That's a lot. That's it definitely lines up with sort of the path that your life has taken you. So the fact that that's something that you pursued definitely shows how, like, I don't know, sort of how intense you were treated, and just sort of honestly, the whole purpose of the show is misperception, and just being in your shoes at the age of 16 or 17 when all this went down. And we'll get to that, to where you are now. I imagine so much mentally has changed for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. Just in recovering from psychological after effects of my experience, post-traumatic stress disorder, related symptoms such as panic attacks, anxiety, altered personality, mood swings. That aspect of it. Stigma associated with it, technology being different, GPS, cell phones, internet not being created, culture being different, and cities and towns looking different. So those 3 things, often makes it feel like I'm in a parallel world.
Yeah, it's funny. First off, I'd like to introduce my co-host Sean Shank. I guess he did not get the link. That's my fault, so I sent it over real quick. Shank, this is Jeffrey Deskovic.
Jeffrey, pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. Is it Shank or is it Shank? Which is a fair question coming from me.
Yes, it is. It is Shank, like the backside of a pig's leg, a bad golf shot, and of course, stabby prison device. Absolutely.
Oh. All right. Never thought I'd be happy to see a Shank, but nice to meet you through your podcast. But let's press on. We've kind of teased around, not quite got the backstory out, but yes. You came up just in time.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, I've been very much looking forward to this for a few weeks, and this is when we do these podcasts. Jukebox gets, most of the information, and then we kind of ride along for what's happening. So I've done a little bit of research, but I try to stay away from it a bit because I just wanted to experience you and your story and everything organically.
Great.
Yes. And I definitely want to start out like headstrong right into the case and sort of what happened and then backtrack. So let's set the scene with November 17th of 1989 when
So
the body was found.
sure. So I was just it's exactly the date that you mentioned, and a classmate of mine that I barely knew. Her name was Angela Correa. She was an immigrant from Colombia. She had been in the country for about a year and a half. Didn't speak very much English. Lived a very sheltered life, as I later came to learn, where in which she never went anywhere unless she was accompanied by her older sister or her parents. So, she went missing on November 15th, and her body was found 2 days later, November 17th. It was found naked from the waist down. Murders were pretty rare in Peekskill, so it created an atmosphere of fear, rumor, paranoia. Parents were concerned with their own safety and the safety of their children.
Yeah, I listened to some of your other interviews and sort of the scene of where she was found, and just based on the timing, the year and everything, like we talked about, there wasn't social media wasn't really a thing, you know.
Right.
So what was the town like? Because like you said, it wasn't a very large town. Like, was the whole town involved in this when it happened?
It was. The population was approximately 25,000 people. And, it's set kind of like this, Peekskill calls itself a city. It's really more like a town, but I guess we'll call it a city because it does, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's small and, had a small town feel to it. And, parents were driving their kids to school, picking them up after school, bringing them straight home. There was rumors abound. There were town hall meetings held by the mayor and the police in which, progress on investigation was given, safety tips were given out, and really it really shook everybody up emotionally to the point that free mental health counseling was offered throughout the city to anyone who wanted it.
That's it. You say 25,000, and while that seems like a large number on its face, if you've been around towns of that size, it's not really that shocking, because 25,000 in a town that size isn't really that big. That's kind of a place where most people on some level know each other, or in some kind of tertiary sense know of people. That's
Correct.
not that big. So I can see, what you're saying would impact a community like that, because it's not a big city.
Correct.
So at what point did the officers, start looking at, because I imagine they started talking to neighborhood kids, and obviously you were one of them. But at what point did they almost they took you in? Is this correct? Almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. Well, yes. So let me about I want to say maybe like 4 to 6 weeks in, the police intercepted me on my way to the school. They interviewed a lot of students from the high school, and some of the kids told the police they might want to talk with me because I didn't quite fit in. And I guess their thinking process was that people who are quiet unto themselves commit heinous crimes. So that's what got me on their radar. And in addition, I was a sensitive teenager. This was my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction. And to the police, that was suspicious because, look, you barely knew this girl. Why would you be upset that way? But although in a larger sense, I wasn't all that different from other people in the city because, again, it shook everyone up to the point that free mental health services were offered. So those two factors. And then thirdly, a reinforcing factor is that they got a psychological profile from the NYPD, which purported to have the characteristics of the actual perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that. So it was a reinforcing factor. So for the next 6 weeks, they played this cat and mouse game with me in which half the time they talked to me as a suspect, and when it would push too hard and I would get frightened and I'd want to get away from them, Jeff is this junior would switch it up, and Jeff is this junior detective helper theme was developed. So they would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around you, but they will around us. They won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They'd ask opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinion was correct. Prior to being a teenager, I dreamed about being a cop when I grew up. And so that was how that that along with my age, that's how they pull the wool over my eyes.
It's sad that this is something that occurs, and I've had a stepfather who was very abusive, but he was also an officer at one point, and it was very contradicting, and just kind of definitely changed my views on things too. So obviously those are two different aspects totally, but there is one thing I do in this show where I kind of almost jump back and forth a little bit to kind of throw things off a little bit. And I would like to do that at this point before we kind of go through the process
That's
of
fine.
the 6 weeks before you're convicted. But you confessed to this crime at one point, correct?
Correct.
And what exactly was the confession, if you're free to, if you're willing to talk it, to say it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you want me to just jump it? Well, so they got me to agree to take a lie detector test. They said, look, kid, we got some new information in the file. We want to share that with you. That'll let you be more helpful to us. So, but you got to pass the polygraph first.
Right.
So I agreed to take the polygraph. I went to the police station for the polygraph on a school day. So my mother and grandmother thought I was in school. Therefore, they didn't call around looking for me. Drove me up from Peekskill in Westchester County to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County. So 40 minutes away by car, which means I can't leave on my own. I'm dependent upon the police. The polygraph was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he's dressed like a civilian. He doesn't identify himself as law enforcement, doesn't read me my rights. I don't have an attorney, don't give me anything to eat. I don't understand the big words in the brochure, which explains how the polygraph worked, that I figured I'm there to help the police, so it doesn't matter. Let's just get on with it. He puts me in a small room. He gives me countless cups of coffee. Then he attaches me to the machine, and he launches into his third-degree tactics. He invades my personal space. He raises his voice at me. He keeps asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. So in terms of that, I mean, they in the course of that interrogation and the 6 weeks up to that, they gave me a bunch of details about the crime, which I, in my desperation to get out of there. So they were doing the good cop, bad cop routine.
Right.
And once he says, look, you failed, and after the 6.5 to 7 hours, the good cop comes in the room and says, they're going to hurt you. I've been holding them off. I can't do this any longer. You got to help yourself. Look, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards and you're not going to be arrested. So being young, naive, frightened, 16, I wasn't thinking the long term. I was just concerned with my safety in the moment. So I made up a story, in which basically parroted back what they told me. I said that I became aware that she was going to the park, that she was going to see some other guy. Don't see some other guy. She said to me, don't tell me what to do. And, they told me that there was 3 different crime scenes. So, so I said that she ran, that I tackled her, and, she was raped here. The body was dragged there. But they gave me all those. Then I put the leaves over. But they gave me all those details before. Yeah. I was just spitting back, and actually how the crime actually happened, which we know because, jumping ahead, the actual perpetrator was later found. The way, that's not how the crime happened.
Yes.
And so that's what I said. And the last thing is I said that, I hit her over the head with a Gatorade bottle. But back in those days, the Gatorade bottles were not in plastic; they were in glass.
Hefty. Yeah, those big,
right.
Yeah.
But even with that, the type of injuries that the medical examiner said that she sustained to her head, could not have been caused by a glass bottle. You would have had to have something harder than that. And on top of that, why is there no shattered glass either? Anyways, none on the body, none at the crime scene.
Right.
So that is the content. And the last thing is I did say that I ripped her bra off.
Right.
And that's important. We're going to come back to that when we get to the trial. And by the way, none of this was videotaped. It was not audio taped. There's no signed confession, just the cop's word for it.
Okay, if I might interject here, though, there's no justice in this. There's no solid police work because, one, as you stated, they're feeding you the bits of information. You're 16. You are under duress. you don't have a lawyer. There's so many things that are wrong about this. But the thing that I find particularly egregious, aside from the scare tactics and everything else, is this whole thing about lie detectors. They are so fallible. Even the man that invented the lie detector said it was a junk invention. Like the guy that invented it said that this is why it's not admissible in court. But yet they will turn around and like they would do with you, just take the lie detector. That's all you need to do. Oh, we jacked you up with caffeine and we're scaring you and everything. How else did they think your body was going to react to this outward stimulus? An internal stimulus. Of course you're going to be reacting physically in every other way. And then they can point at that. Ooh, we failed it. What are you talking about? This is not police work. You're just trying to pigeonhole somebody into a confession. That's all I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's completely correct. I just want to share for your listeners the whole premise of the polygraph is that if a person tells a lie, you'll become nervous. The nervousness will result in an increased pulse rate, and the machine actually measures the pulse rate. But but other factors have been known to increase people's pulse rates, including fear,
which they were drilling into you.
Right.
Which they were drilling into me. Sure. Even by polygraph standards, the longest they could see somebody being polygraphed would be like 3 hours. And here they had me on this thing more than double.
Right. You were ready to get out of there.
Right. And they were supposed, and it was, in the Baxter method, which they used, you're supposed to have either a video recording or audio recording because of the high incidence rate of false confessions being caused by it. But they violated, as flawed as the machine is, and it is junk and it's totally not scientific. But even with that, they even violated some of their own protocols in that.
Right. Yeah, and the reason that I wanted to kind of get this part out of the way is because as we kind of unravel things, it'll be very obvious to the listeners how corrupt and mistreated you were as a teenage kid. So we do know that was Stephen Cunningham was the actual murderer,
Yes.
who 4 years later was actually arrested for the murder of a teacher, correct?
Yes, 3.5 years later, he was captured for strangling a teacher who also had 2 children. It was actually his girlfriend's sister because, he was a drug addict and she walked in on him while he was in the middle of stealing her VCR, which, if you remember back in the day, VCRs, they were expensive, and she wouldn't agree to give him the VCR, and unfortunately, he decided to kill her in order to take it.
It's such a shame because I did read the article where he confesses about it, but it sounds like he could care less that you spent all that time.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. So, Cunningham later, once the DNA matches him, he winds up eventually confessing, and he claims that if he knew that I was in prison for his crime, that he would have came forward and said something. But to the extent that an apology from a double murderer who allowed me to do 16 years, to the extent that would have held any value at all whatsoever, he managed to take the little bit from that by mixing this lie into it and rendered it meaningless, because in such a small city, there's no way he could have not known about it. And actually, I know somebody in Peekskill who, like about 30 years ago, was a drug addict who actually knew Stephen Cunningham, who used to get high with Stephen Cunningham. And she told me that in the course of them getting high together, sometimes in their conversation, they would talk about the murder. I mean, he wouldn't say anything to let on or give any clue that he was the perpetrator, but they would talk about the crime and they would talk about me being arrested and found guilty of it. So I know that there's no way, aside from the fact that this was a huge media deal, and every time I went to court, it was a big media moment. There's no way he could have not known that I was doing time for his crime.
So you did 16 years. Now, when you were found guilty, what kind of emotions were going through your mind?
Sure, but can I just quickly
Whatever
mention
you
what
want,
happened at
yeah.
the trial? Let me just do the
Yes.
trial really quickly, and then
That's
I'll
fine.
come right to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before the trial, the DNA doesn't match me. It shows that seminal fluid found in and around the victim didn't match me. But the prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud, to commit perjury. So 6 months after doing this autopsy, once the DNA doesn't match me, he suddenly says, try to follow this now. It's going to be tricky.
Yeah.
He remembered that he forgot to document medical evidence, which he claimed showed that Angela was promiscuous, which is how the that is how the DNA doesn't match Deskovic, and yet he's guilty. She was sleeping around. Matter of fact, she slept around the day that she was murdered. And then he mentioned the person by name, the other youth by name that he claimed had slept with the victim, but he never tried to set the proper evidentiary foundation. So he never didn't call him as a witness to give testimony, didn't get a blood sample to do DNA testing, just made the unsupported argument to the jury. The police officers left the threat and false promise out of their testimony when they came to court. The public defender I had essentially didn't defend me. He didn't present my alibi. I told him who I was with and what I was doing. I was playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me, never used that to challenge the confession. Literally didn't ask the medical examiner any questions. He said, you're going to be pleased to know that I don't have a single question for you. Then he should have never represented me, because this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of the same public defender agency, which prevented us from asking him for a sample, which prevented the defense from calling him as a witness. He would not allow me to testify. He said it wasn't his job to prove that I was innocent. He was up to the prosecution to prove I was guilty. That's a very naive way of practicing law. You have to answer the confession. You have to explain the confession. You have to bring it all together in your closing argument.
Right.
But he didn't do that. Instead, he argued to the jury. Sometimes a confession never happened. Other times he said it did happen, but it was coerced. And still other times he was arguing it was false. So the other two irregularities in my trial is the judge allowed the polygraphist to repeatedly tell the jury that I lied when I denied committing the crime. So he told the jury that I failed the polygraph. And lastly, when the jury asked to see the victim's bra, which had been entered into evidence, that's when the judge said, well, the bra was left in the court over the weekend, and the janitors thought it was garbage, so it was thrown out. It's not available anymore. And he replaced the bra with a photo in which he said that you could almost see the bra. And lastly, on the third day of the jury deliberation, they sent out a note and asked, well, if we can't come up with a verdict, are we going to be kept sequestered over the Christmas holiday? I learned many years later at that point it was 11-1 for a conviction, but there was a holdout juror, but they were all pressing the holdout. And when the judge gave that answer, they really ratcheted up the pressure, and nobody wanted to be there over the Christmas holiday, including the juror. So he switched his vote, and I was found guilty.
My God.
Any comment on that before I get to your question about my reaction?
So,
Go ahead.
Well, first off, if a janitor is cleaning a courtroom and sees a bra, my reaction, if I was a janitor, would not be, oh, this is trash. It would be, why in the hell is there a bra in the courtroom?
No, it depends on the courtroom.
Well, it was a bra. It was a bra. It was her moccasins. It was a pair of jeans, and it was all in like a brown paper bag.
Okay.
But even so, it's a courtroom. You don't look. You don't know what it is. I mean, why would that's that? But on the judicial level, why would you even leave evidence in the open court like that? And wouldn't you give instruction to court personnel and security? Hey, don't touch that. Or why wouldn't you lock that up in a closet or something?
Right.
Well, it sounds like it is just I would say an amazing amount of effort put in to willfully ignore procedure and due process because it's like that old saying, it better that 100 guilty people go free than one innocent man go to prison, right? But in this case, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they were so desperate because of the small community that you were in to get this buttoned up that they were going to, it's almost like taking a puzzle piece and jamming it in because you just want to get the puzzle finished, right?
Right.
And that's what it sounds like they were trying to do with you. No matter what, they were going to try to make it fit.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree. There was a lot of public pressure on the police to solve the crime, and there was also pressure from the state police because the victim's family went to the state police and said, "Look, we don't think they have enough experience. We don't think they know what they're doing. Can you guys take over the investigation?"
Right.
Which they didn't do, but they told the Peekskill police that they had been approached. So yet another level of pressure.
Right. And up to this point, like, did you think without a doubt that you were not going to be found guilty?
Yes, up until this point, I thought without a doubt that I was going to be found not guilty because, to my way of thinking, at least up until that point in time, only guilty people were convicted. So, to answer your question, when I was found guilty, I I was kind of like in a stunned disbelief. It felt like it was like a nightmarish surrealness. So the first three charges, because they had charged me with different theories of murder. The first three charges they read off, the jury found me not guilty of. So I hear not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Then I suddenly hear guilty. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Did I just hear that right? Did I miss the word not? They can't, but guilty.
My goodness.
And you, so are you still 16 at this time, or are you 17?
No, I was 16 when I was arrested. I had turned 17 just before, a couple of months before the trial. So right now I'm 17.
Okay. And they didn't, I mean, there was no juvenile detention. You went straight to prison.
Right. I was given a 15 to life sentence because I had been charged and tried as an adult. So they sentenced me as an adult. The judge sentenced me, by the way, despite saying to me, maybe you are innocent. And then I was sent to a men's maximum security prison where I would stay for 16 years.
Before we get into the term that you served, let's jump back to sort of the investigation part of it and
Sure.
the things that led up to your false confession.
Mm-hmm.
So you, if I remember right from listening to some of the other interviews, you were in private school and then you wanted to be in a public school, right?
Right. Yes.
So you already kind of had a social disadvantage, would you say?
Yes, I would say that. Yeah, yes, because I was totally unfamiliar with the people in the public school. So my calculation in purposely failing the parochial school entrance exam so that I could go to a public high school, which is right next door, rather than a Catholic school like my mother wanted me to do, is because after school I was kind of a popular kid, and and almost all of my friends were going to public school. And usually whatever I would suggest would be what we would do if we're going to play Monopoly or ride bikes or go swimming or shoot hoops or play stickball or any number of other games that we did would usually be what I would do. And I had a really fun time. I was, I was athletic and energetic. So I thought, well, let me go, instead of this dreary life that I have at school where it's a different life, let me go to a public high school where I can be in with all my friends. Not realizing that, look, they're not going to be in my classes. I'm like 1 or 2 years older than most of them, but the kids in the school in the grade I'm going to are going to be a little bit older than me because I got skipped in the first grade because I was advanced in the kindergarten. So all of that resulted in my, being on the fringes of the society in the high school, which is what led people to suggest to the cops to look at me, which is what got the ball rolling.
what you say got the ball rolling? Like, what were some of the things that were being said to kind of direct the cops your way?
All I ever learned was that some of the kids told the police they might want to look at me because I was quiet to myself. But I was actually the third suspect. So it started off that they were suspicious of the victim's stepfather. But he ended up hiring a retired NYPD police officer to investigate. And that was persuasive to the Peekskill police. So they moved on from him as a suspect.
Okay.
And the next person they looked at was the youth that they later would falsely claim that had slept with the victim. They started doing these same roughhouse tactics, bringing him to the police station, not allowing him to leave, this aggressive questioning. But the difference between him and I is he had a stepfather in the home. And the stepfather got wind of what was going on, went down to the police station. They wouldn't let him in to see his stepson. Eventually they did, and he went and got an attorney for his stepson. So at that point, they moved on from him and focused in on me.
Yeah, so they were going after the one person that didn't have representation, didn't have somebody fighting for him. You're the easiest target,
Right.
Well, and they also pursued you differently. They didn't make you feel like you were being a suspect.
Right. They would start out that way and in each encounter, and then when they would push too hard, I'd want to get away from, that's when they, this junior detective helper thing. And that also was facilitated by their good cop, bad cop routine, because my father was never involved in my life in any aspect. When I was still in my mother's womb, he wanted to get out of financial responsibility. So even back then, he was pretending that I wasn't his. Okay, so
Right.
that intersected with the good cop, bad cop routine, because I began to look up to the cop who was pretending to be my friend as a father figure.
Right.
So they kept me off balance, and really, they're grown adults. They're in law enforcement. I'm a 16-year-old, and honestly speaking, they overreached me.
And when they first approached you, did you inform your mom that they had talked to you?
Yeah, the first time that they approached me, they did. They intercepted me on my way to school. They convinced me to go down to the police station to talk to them. They were telling me they needed my help, and I told them I don't know anything about the crime. I don't see how I can be helpful, but they wanted me to be helpful anyway, and they persisted. And so I went to the police station, and I was there from the time they intercepted me around 8 o'clock in the morning till about 1:30 in the afternoon. So I wound up telling my mother, and she told me she didn't want me to interact with the police. But then the police reached out to me through one of my best friends at the time. The cops would like to talk to you, and I was 16 years old, and I had been, despite my mother not wanting me to talk to them, we were raised in general to the police, respect the police, and they're your friend, they're there to help. I didn't know. I figured, oh, I don't know. I didn't do it. And I know I don't know anything about it. So I don't see what could possibly happen, what could possibly go wrong. And then they're feeding my ego, and then they're appealing to, what the career is when I want to have when I grew up. They got, they know I want to be a cop, and, Jeff is this junior detective helper. And, at 16, that's the age when kids start to push back against the authority of their parents. And, you
Right.
want individuality and rebellion, and and our parents are all dumb. We know better than them. Except that my mother did know better than me.
Right. Now, if I may ask, at any point while they were the police, who and I think what you're saying rings so true, because I remember back to grade school, and we would be given these worksheets, and you see a police officer on there. It's like, if you're ever in trouble, go to a police officer, go to a firefighter. You know what I mean? Like, we're taught from a young age to respect those authority figures, and they are there to help. I mean, it's only until we become adults when you learn, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, is a threatening phrase. But at any point during your, we'll just call it your interrogations, did you say, maybe I should talk to a lawyer. Did that ever come to your mind? Did you ever say that? And did they ever say, you don't need one of those?
No, that never came. That never came to my mind. I do want to say on a semi related note that every time they came to that portion of the Miranda warnings where they would say, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney, and if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided to you. I remember my mind would go to what I saw on TV and different civil court contexts, and I remember thinking to myself, "Court? What are you talking about? We're not going to court."
Right.
So I never had any idea. But even with them saying, so my age, not understanding that, but then further, they're keeping me off balance with this Jeff is a junior detective helper thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point, or even several points, they actually took you to the crime scenes, correct?
That's right. Correct. Yes, and that's what I was alluding to earlier when I mentioned they gave me details. They took me to the crime scene at night, and they're pointing out, well, this happened here and that happened there, and the body was found over here with leaves. It almost seemed like whoever did this, despite doing this act of violence, was now trying to protect her by putting leaves over her body to try to protect the body from the elements. Is that what happened, Jeff? Is that what happened? So they gave me all these details, and then they showed me all these graphic photos of the crime scene, including photos where her body is in. So they did everything wrong. They did all of that is what's referred to, as I'm sure Shank will confirm in a second. That's all called contamination.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, without question. But the thing is, they're imprinting is what they're doing on you when they're putting these tactics in. And then when they say, is that what's happening, Jeff? You're probably not even thinking about it. You're 16. Well, yeah, that sounds about right, officer. I mean, because you're
correct.
Just thinking,
right.
Well, yeah. I mean, as a junior detective, I think that sounds about right. And it's
yes, you got it. No other host ever figured that out before.
It's so crazy. Have you ever seen the movie My Cousin Vinny?
I have. Yes.
Remember when the officer is talking to Ralph Macchio and he says, and so that's when you shot him. And he goes, I shot him. And he goes, yeah, you shot him. He goes, I shot him. That's what this seems like.
Yeah. Right.
Where they're just like they're putting words and thoughts into your mouth.
Correct.
And you're not even it's not even cluing into you at that point. Yeah. But they're just checking off boxes going, yeah, we got this kid.
Yeah.
What a nightmare.
Exactly. And then on top of that, again, I want to emphasize too, they're phrasing these questions like opinion questions. Like in my mind, I'm giving you my opinion, like you said, as the junior detective helper. Yeah. Okay. I'm not telling you what I did. I know how to speak about myself if I'm telling you what I did, but that's not what is occurring. I'm just opining. I'm just opining, and they're egging me on, and well, you're doing remarkably well. You're doing remarkably. You're doing remarkably. Are you using a computer? Computers, because you're very accurate and all this stuff, and computers can do some really amazing things. And
right, and it's 1989, so computers, back then, are nothing like they were. I mean, it barely even existed.
Right. Yeah, but they're doing that to try to flatter me and to try to, now I gotta kind of live up to that. I can't start shooting their scenarios down and saying, no, I don't think it's that. First of all, what other alternative, what life experience would I have had, even just to try to guesstimate this scenario versus this other scenario? I try to handicap it in my mind, and what's more likely to have happened. I'm not able to do all of that. I don't have a choice but to go along with what you're saying, because I don't have the ability to generate my own scenario.
How long? How long did this? How was this time span?
This was about 6 weeks. This was six weeks.
Were you still going to school throughout this?
I was still going to school throughout this. Yes.
So I do have one question that, and I'm gonna guess the answer is that it didn't go through your mind. But were you asking kids like, "Hey, have you been getting pulled by the cops? Hey, have you been this is what they're doing with me."
All right, so I didn't ask that, but I did hear through the rumor mill that a couple of other people were questioned by the police.
So you weren't really thinking that, oh, it's just me.
No, exactly. No, I thought it was. I know this is going to sound crazy to say, but I thought it was normal.
I don't think that's crazy to say at all.
I am. This is off subject, and I'm going to be very quick with it. But I was abused as a child for about 7 years, and when my mom finally left, I thought that's how every kid's life was. So when we got away from that, it was like, wait a minute, that's not how it is. So I mean, I that doesn't sound crazy to me at all.
Okay.
So we've kind of discussed the interrogation and the investigation. They're basically feeding you your false confession. That's literally what it is.
Correct.
And when you were found, I mean, is there anything else that you want to touch base on this before we move towards your time in incarcerated?
No, that's everything.
Okay. How about you, Sean? You got any questions for him before we get into the incarceration?
Well, not knowing what your support system was like at the time.
Well, I can tell you that. So really, it was just my mother and my aunt. Now, we had heard, so I had an uncle by marriage that was in law enforcement, and he conveyed to us that the intel he collected was that the trial lawyer that I had from the public defender's office was supposed to be their best trial lawyer. So we were under the impression that we were in good hands. He met with me very few times. When I tried to ask him like what our strategy and everything else is, he's like, look, kid, you're a teenager. You be the defendant. Let me be the lawyer. You already thought that you were smarter than adults already once. Okay. And you see how that turned out. So you got arrested. So why don't you just sit back and let me do my job. Okay. So that's that. And he took a very narrow view of attorney-client privilege. My lawyer found a way to use attorney-client privilege against me, meaning that he would not allow my uncle, he wouldn't allow my mother, he wouldn't allow my mother's stepfather to be included in any of the strategic decisions that we had to make in the course of the trial, such as whether or not I was going to testify or not, such as whether we're going to have a bench trial, which is decided by a judge, or a jury trial. So so I was essentially cut off. And frankly, I was in over my head. I only understood what was going on in the courtroom but to a certain extent.
Right.
So I didn't have any real support in terms of that, or understanding the process, or having adults to think with me.
No, it sounds like you were, basically isolated, and what 17-year-old is going to have the mental wherewithal to, be able to stand up in court and say, no, this isn't, that the amount of pressure that you must have been under must have been just stultifying. I can't even imagine. But and this might sound a bit conspiracy theorist on my end, but to me, the way this is all stacking up, it literally sounds like your public defender on some level seems like he was in cahoots with the rest of the public officials to get this thing wrapped up, because as you said, to take such a narrow view of what that means, and basically telling his client, you know what, shut the hell up, kid, I got this, when he or she in fact did not have it at all.
Right. That's exactly right. So last thing on this, then we'll move to the prison. But as a corollary to that, and in support of that, when I've had lunch with many attorneys in Westchester County, I'm frequently asked, well, what was the name of the public defender that you had? And when I give the name, they're all very surprised because they say, wow, well, I've had cases with them. I've tried cases alongside them. I've tried cases against them. He's a very good trial lawyer. I don't understand what the heck happened here, because a lot of these things that we're talking about, I mean, a good third year law student would know not to do.
Yeah. So,
what do you
go
think?
ahead.
I mean, Jukebox. I mean, what does that sound like to you?
No, I mean, and today, so I grew up through sort of the social media exploding, because I graduated in 2007, and so I remember having a pager. So, but the way social media is now, and doing this interview with you, it's almost in a sense stereotypical based on some of the things you see on social media now, having to deal with federal things. But back when I was maybe in high school and you didn't have your TikTok and your Facebook and stuff, this is just shocking. So I imagine you as a high school student this is just a flip of a switch when you were found guilty.
Yes, it was. I was fully expecting to be acquitted because that's what all the adults around me were telling me. I want to add that as I went to court, and every time I went to court, it was this major media moment. It was everything from from a guilt presumptive oriented perspective, all the media coverage. So it was a scary and out of control feeling,
Right.
to
And
see my name in the newspapers and talking, like if I'm guilty and
the only views were probably saying that you were guilty, because there's, again, social media didn't really exist besides a newspaper. So
right.
whatever people were reading in town or anything, I'm guessing even when you were incarcerated, people who saw news articles, which we'll get to that, I'm sure, were probably like, oh, look what this guy did.
Right, exactly. And the fact that there was a false confession lent credibility to that.
Yeah. So you're found guilty. You're 17 years old. Your whole world is just being flipped upside down. What was the process of getting incarcerated?
So when I got convicted, I was taken into custody immediately. I mean, I was on bail. When you're found guilty, they take you into custody right away. And it was a very difficult adjustment to be incarcerated. I got sentenced. We discussed that, and then shortly after that, I was transferred to a reception center, which is the first prison you go to. And in a reception center, you're like the name implies, you're assessed. They do psychological assessment. They do medical assessment. They issue your supplies. All the information is conveyed to, the headquarters, Department of Correction headquarters, and they determine what prison you're best suited to be sent to for your first facility. So I wound up being sent to Elmira Correctional Facility, which was 4.5 hours from where I lived. Elmira had the reputation as junior gladiator school. Shane can elaborate on that, given his name in a moment. But there was 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day. A lot of violence that didn't involve weapons. There was gang activity. So cumulatively, there was a general environment of violence and adrenaline that permeated the air. The guards were unprofessional. Most of them, some were professional, did their job. Most of them did not. And there was a lot of verbal abuse, and some were lazy and they would not break fights up, and because they didn't want to have to file paperwork and possibly get injured. So food was terrible. Sometimes it wasn't fully cooked. Other times it was burnt. It was difficult adjusting to being in a cell.
So you're already a quiet kid, though, right?
Correct. That is right.
So you're going into this environment, which I can't imagine is quiet on any level.
It's not on any level. No, it's very, very loud.
Yeah, so it's loud. A lot of testosterone, a lot of kind of, I would assume, Lord of the Flies, insanity. How long, or did you even have the ability to think, I don't belong here, this isn't right? Or is it just like, man, I have got to get myself acclimated to this, or I'm not going to make it through? Because I'm just sitting here thinking about the mental gymnastics a person would have to go through, being innocent, knowing that you're innocent, and you're in basically a place full of miscreants and ne'er-do-wells, right?
Well, it was it was both. So I'll go into that a little bit. So I remember when I first arrived in Elmira, the guards asked me, "Well, do you want to go to protective custody?" And I'm like, "Well, what's that?" Well, if you felt that your life was in danger, which it likely would be, given what you're charged with, you got if you just had the murder, you'd be fine, except that there's a rape attached to it, so you're not. The only way we could protect you, that would be if you told us you felt your life was in danger. And well, if I do that, what would that actually be like? Well, you'd be kept in the cell 23 hours a day, and you'd go out to recreation by yourself, and take a shower, use the phone, use the TV. You'd be by yourself. It's just an hour. You'd be in your cell. Besides that, you can't go to recreation. You can't do any educational. You're just going to be in the cell. And so at 17, the thought crossed my mind. I made a snap decision, because you have to let them know what you're going to do. And I thought to myself, well, look, I already can't believe that I'm here. I still can't believe everything I've seen, the prison wall, the barbed wire, all the visual cues that letting me know I'm incarcerated for something I didn't do, I can't believe that this has actually happened. But I think to myself, despite that, I'm not going to agree to a set of conditions that's going to make my situation go from bad to worse. So I'm just going to go to general population and take my chances. And if somebody kills me, well, I guess I don't have to worry about doing the rest of this life sentence anymore that I have. Now, do I?
I do want to just step in real quick. There's several people watching. If you guys do have questions, leave them in the comments. I'll throw them up on the screen and we can discuss them. But just that mindset right there that you said about, well, if I get killed, I get killed. I mean, it's emotionally, it's so corrupt in itself that you're at that point, just based on like the way you were treated through this whole trial, through the whole thing.
Yeah, it is. And, I want to say it was very hard for me to adjust being in a cell. I mean, initially I just try to, sleep things off whenever I was in the cell, but, that's not a healthy way of, dealing with things, to the extent that any way of dealing with anything in prison could be considered to be healthy. But I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, thoughts of giving up. Of course, you entertain suicide, but, maybe I had a coward's line of reasoning in not committing suicide. I think, well, if I do try to commit suicide and this doesn't go right, then then maybe this won't go right either. And now I'm going to still be in here wrongfully. Only now I'm going to be, my neck's broke, or maybe I'm stuck in a wheelchair. So I better not do that. And and then I'm thinking also, I have I can't give in to the thought, okay? I want to just lay down in the damn bed. I don't want to go through the prison life process. I don't want to talk. I don't want to go through the whole routine. I feel like just laying there in one great big protest and just lose my mind, except that I can't do that because nobody's coming to my rescue. And so if I'm going to get the hell out of here, I'm going to have to try to hold it together to try to find somebody that doesn't exist at present. And the only way I can pull off that miracle, slim as the hope might be, I have no choice but to hold it together.
Right.
So I have all those dynamics. And, I had some advice along the way. Like, one old timer suggested, look, you got to go to the law library and study the, look, you don't waste your time being a janitor, called a porter, get the GED, go to college, take the programs that you should take,
Right.
Look, don't get involved in the prison politics. Another person here's some prison survival tactics,
Right.
So all of those, but it's not like somebody put me under the wing, like in a cohort fashion going forward. It's more that one person had one nugget of wisdom or another, they played their role in giving that to me, and then they moved on. And I'm the only constant in the story.
In the contrast, so I know we're very focused on what's going on the inside, but as you're talking, you're telling me these things, my brain's going to, and on the outside, what's going on with the family? And are these guys all patting each other on the back like, yeah, good job, we got this guy, everything's hunky-dory outside, and you're tucked away inside. I mean, it's just like, what is the contrasting?
Well, they got a lot of credit, but they got a lot of credit for solving the case. And the lieutenant went on to become a police chief based in part on his overseeing, they're solving this case. And, there was lots of accolades. Oh, it was a textbook case that they developed. And that was all said publicly. That phrase was said. Textbook. It was uttered.
I would love to see the textbook. I write books, and I can't imagine putting something together like that and saying, "Yeah, this is good authorship." Textbook.
Yeah, this is the model. We got to more follow like this.
This was a mob hit, is what it is. I stand
by the other inmates, when you were brought in, were they aware of what you were brought in for?
They were not. No. So I kept my head down. I tried to avoid attracting any attention because I wanted to minimize, that, for the most part, I don't think most people realized throughout the years, but there were at times where that did happen. There were some times where I was beat up. One time I nearly lost my life. I mean, the lowest point, the most difficult time of that was I was sent from Elmira to Shawangunk. There was a high concentration of old timers there, so that whole vigilante mentality was fairly ingrained into their psyche. And people went to the law library and made copies of my case, because when you do an appeal, the decision comes out in the law book. So it wasn't a lot happening in Elmira, so people were bored, so they got into each other's business, and so people went to the law library and they made photocopies of my case, and they were they stapled it to the bulletin board, and they were passing it out to people. So as you might imagine, what the impact of that was, everybody turned hostile, and the few that did not turn hostile, they they want nothing to do with me just because of the politics of it. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very dangerous. So that's where I got hit multiple times on the side of my head with a 10-pound weight plate, like you might put on, like if you're doing flat bench, and got scars on my hands, and I got hit multiple times. Almost lost my life on that one. And on top of that, I mean, they could have. They asked both of us to go. Well, the security asked both of us, did either one of us want to press charges against the other one? So I mean, I very nearly caught another case. I
was getting ready to say, yeah.
I very nearly caught another case right there.
Just from defending yourself, yeah.
Just from defending myself, yeah.
My goodness.
So you clearly steered away from the suicidal aspect of it, and you started learning, you're reading books.
Started learning the law. So I started going to the law library because I didn't trust lawyers to defend me anymore, given what happened at the trial.
Fair.
Okay, yeah. So that's just all a nervous laugh, okay?
Yeah.
Watching. So I used to also collect articles about people that were exonerated. I would want to study who helped them, what route did they take. I would also use the articles as motivation to keep going. Then also, I was not going to my prison assignment in the morning and my prison assignment at night. I'm going to school and I'm going to work, and it's not the prison guards, it's the correction officer, and it's not the warden, it's the superintendent. And you settle into a routine, and I took all kind of educational programs. I got GED, associates. I got towards the bachelor's. When they cut the funding for college education for prisoners, I did plumbing, general business, which pertains to different usages of the computer in a workforce setting, computer repair, plumbing, painting, food service. I took a class on how adults learned, and then I worked as a teacher's aide for a year and a half. Then from 98 to 2006, I read 3 or 4 nonfiction books a week. And, my appeals were ultimately over. I began, the only way back into court is if you can find some new evidence. But, I'd like to discuss a little bit about the appeal process and how I was exonerated.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first court went to the appellate division. My lawyer argued. I have a different lawyer now. Now I actually have a real lawyer. Okay. That's trying hard. Novel concept that is. So the lawyer argues that I'm innocent based on a DNA. They argued there was legally insufficient evidence. The prosecution hadn't proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that the verdict was against the weight of the evidence. They argued that my Fifth Amendment rights had been violated by the way I'd been questioned. They argued that my right to confront my accusers, my Sixth Amendment right, had been violated because the judge, while allowing the polygraphist to tell that you kept telling the jury I failed, blocked my lawyer from asking him questions on the methods he used. The evidence being thrown out was argued, and the judge being biased. All told, 10 issues of law were argued. The prosecution answered, one thing that sticks out, I'm going to mention, they wrote, now this is a lawyer now, okay, with a law degree, legal education, who knows what DNA is. They wrote that a negative DNA test is no insulation to a guilty verdict. And then I'm going to just answer this thing, and I'll let Cenk get in because I can see, he wants to.
Right.
He wants to. So their decision, well, actually, let's take your comment.
Go ahead.
Because it's going to. When I tell you the court decision on all of this, that's going to take you for a loop.
Right.
I'm mortified. That's akin to saying, like, look, just because you're innocent doesn't mean you're not guilty. I mean, it's essentially what you just said.
Yeah.
What the guy said. What is?
Now,
I mean, are we in clown world? What is going on?
Now, if you think that's something, where do you get a load of this?
Yeah.
Okay. The court said that I was free to come and go as I wanted, and therefore the statements were all voluntary. They wrote that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt, which doesn't make sense because the DNA doesn't match me. They have this confession obtained under highly questionable circumstances, and they got the DNA test, which shows I didn't do it. And then they knocked out all of my other issues in one sentence. They looked at my remaining contentions and found them either to be either without merit or else not preserved for review. And they ruled against me 5-0 on that. And it all went downhill. They denied from there. They denied the re-argument motion. In one word, denied. The New York Court of Appeals declined to give me permission to appeal to them. So I lost there. You're going to really love this one. I lost in federal court because the court clerk gave my lawyer the wrong information pertaining to the filing procedure, as a result of which my petition arrived 4 days too late, which former Westchester DA Janine Pirro, her office took the position that those 4 days were prejudicial to the government, so the court should just rule I was late and close the case, which is what the court did. I appealed that ruling to the Federal Court of Appeals, where Judge Rosemary Pooler and future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor upheld that decision. Then they denied my re-argument motion, and then the Supremes declined to give me permission to appeal to them. That's the end of my appeals. I'm permanently locked out of the court unless I could find some previously unknown evidence of innocence, which probably would have led to a different outcome.
I mean, I imagine Shank's the same as me. I'm speechless. How it's inappropriate and disrespect, and then the legal and federal courts on how they're handling any of this.
At every at every turn. Look, guys, I have massive love for the law and our system of justice. Obviously imperfect, but I think it's one of the best in the world when it's applied properly. But it just seems, obviously up to the highest level, that I mean, were you just born under a bad sign, dude, or what is going on here?
So I wrote letters for 4 years trying to find an attorney or investigator because I don't have any money. My family doesn't have any money. And by the way, my mother was my only consistent visitor, but the last 5, 6 years she came once every 6 months. My grandmother passed away while I was in prison. My brother, who's 3.5 years younger than I am, came 3 times in 16 years, not at all in the last decade, and a few different sets of aunts and uncles, which who would come, then disappear for 3 years and would go on. So for most intents and purposes, though not totally, I essentially did the time by myself.
Right.
So I'm writing letters looking for anyone who could help me, law firms, nonprofits, faith-based support organizations, anyone and everyone I could think of, even if someone wasn't in the legal world. If in my mind, I could come up with an action that somebody could take that could set in motion a chain of events that ultimately culminated into my getting the representation I needed, I wrote the letter. So that was my legal work for 4 years.
And you actually did put out a few articles for Pen Pals, correct?
I did. I put a few ads out for Pen Pals. Yeah, that was part of it. And actually, that was good that I did that because I had read that some other people were exonerated. They had came in contact with Pen Pals, and eventually the conversation rolled around to, and by the way, what are you doing in there in the first place? And that opened the door for them to discuss their case, and ultimately the Pen Pal, through one route or another, connected somebody to the legal help that they needed. So that was my ulterior motive in placing the ad. I mentioned that I was interested in the DNA. I did put an ad out in the Sacramento Bee, which was a random newspaper that another prisoner told me about. And I decided to go with that because the first 2 ads I put out were in New York publications. And so the first time, a prison guard from a different prison, I wasn't even in Auburn Correctional Facility, I was in Elmira, but a guard saw my ad and he interpreted my ad in which I was beyond looking for the Pen Pal. I'm mentioning I'm innocent, and maybe you can help me with a lawyer. Maybe you could do fundraising events to help me hire. That was interpreted that I was violating the prison rule of solicitation. So I got in trouble for that. And then when I placed another ad more locally, this time someone in the prison saw it, and I got in trouble for that too. And the lieutenant pulled me into his office, a sergeant rather, and I said, well, look, I'm here and I'm innocent, okay? And I'm not trying to make a problem in the institution. I'm sorry I'm running afoul of this rule, but I'm not about to just sit back and be quiet and, just do this life sentence. My appeals are over and I'm going to die in here if I don't get some help. And so, my appeals are shot. The only way back in is if I can find some new evidence. So I have to write letters. So that's why I put the thing in Sacramento. The Sacramento Bee. I felt fairly confident that no prison employee in New York would see my ad in the Sacramento Bee. But somebody answered the letter. A crime victim of all people, wrote me, and he had his own brush with the law where he felt that the cops didn't do a proper investigation, didn't give him any justice. So he wrote me, and I was at the end of my rope. And I mean, I didn't pay attention to his suggestions because he was in over his head. Some of the suggestions, some of his tactics were kind of off the wall. I mean, he was, suggesting that I write a civilian complaint review board about the cops and these other things that, were kind of ridiculous. So I ignored that part of it. And I just focused on the morale part of his letter, and we talked sports. And I was asking this stranger, look, do you think I should quit? Do you think I should just give up? Is it time to just do the suicide thing? Because I wrote letters for 4 years and never got responses other than the occasional no. And then I went to the parole board where largely based on the fact that I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility. I was denied parole. So it was feeling pretty grim. I felt like it was I wasn't going to get out of there. So my previous generally solid hope was wavering quite a bit, and it seemed like he showed up right in the nick of time and was encouraging me not to commit suicide, to keep going. And so one of those letters, thank God I listened to him, right? But one of those letters that I sent to a book author in care of a publishing house was instead sent to an investigator. The investigator was convinced of my innocence based on the DNA. And by the way, she never saw a case where DNA excluded somebody and yet there was still a conviction. So she suggests I write the Innocence Project again. They're a nonprofit that frees people where DNA testing can demonstrate innocence. So she suggested I write them. I wrote them. I wouldn't have thought to write them again. They previously said no because at the time they wanted to do testing. They wanted there to be no prior results so they could use the test results as newly discovered evidence. And I already had been excluded. So you might say that I was excluded by the DNA a little too soon for my own good. So the results wouldn't have been anything new. But she said, look, the database has been created. So the prior denial is irrelevant. So I wrote them and she lobbied them. She got other people to lobby them. One of the intake workers, when the Innocence Project didn't want to take my case, she represented it a second time and then a third time getting them to take it. So getting their help was the first key. Second thing was Piero left office. Her successor was not as dug in, was willing to let me get the testing. I've heard through the rumor mill that neither one of them liked each other. And Piero was in the middle of running for attorney general in New York. And, I think that I was allowed to have the testing. The DA was hoping that I would be exonerated and it would damage her run for attorney general. But I'll take it. However you get there, you give me the testing, I'll take it. So that was second.
So at this point, are you starting to get some hope back?
I'm starting to get a little bit of hope back. Yes, I am. And the third key is they took the crime scene DNA was put into the data bank and it matched the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was there because he killed the second victim. So my lawyer comes up to see me in a surprise visit. First and only time I saw my lawyer. All the correspondence is by the communication is either by collect call or by mail. She says, look, I'm your lawyer. She mentions her name and says, look, the items have been tested. I'm like, what do you mean? They're not supposed to be tested for another month. She said, yeah, it's been tested. The results match the actual perpetrator. You're going home tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Well, hold on. So you have a visitor.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have visitors. So what's your mind like? What
so
when
they open, so when they open, right? So when they open, I'm thinking, who the hell came to see me? They cracked open my cell door. I stuck my head out. You're supposed to do that. And they said, visit. Well, I walked down. Well, look, can you guys call up there and double check because it's not exactly unheard of that they would send the wrong prisoner to the visiting room, right?
Right.
So they called and double checked. So then I run back and I put on my little dress shirt. Everyone has that little routine in prison. You have one shirt where you're going to the visiting room is the closest you're going to come to being in public. Okay, so you don't want to go there with the state green shirt. You put on your outside. And as I'm buttoning the thing up, as I'm going to I'm thinking to myself, well, who the hell came to see me, right? Right. So when I get there and I'm at the guard desk and this lady is waving her hand like this and I wave back, but I'm thinking, well, she thinks I'm somebody else, or maybe she recognized me from Elmira. So I asked the guard, well, where's my visitor? And she points and it says, well, don't you know who came to see you? And so I quickly said, yeah, of course I do. Because, I wasn't going to say no and, worry that somehow this visit's going to be canceled. I mean, this is a visit, man. This is big. So she says she's my lawyer, says what I said. And, my mind is on alert. As soon as she identifies, I'm on the lookout for any sign of anything being abnormal, because that normally spells disaster.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So she says that the items have been tested. And I'm like, well, no, that's not for next month. And then she says, you're going home. And I said, no, I'm not. And she says, yes, you are. And I said, I'm not. And she says, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not. And then I had the 3.5 hours of mental paralysis, whereby I sat there and she literally held my hand my head is spinning. All these thoughts are coming through my head. One thought after another. One thought has nothing to do with the other. None of it has anything to do with what she just told me. And every now and then she'd cut in and say, well, are you ready to talk about tomorrow? No. I'm not talking about tomorrow. Not going home. Don't play with me that way. I'm not entertaining that. Because by that point, I was afraid to hope anymore. I was afraid to hope. So what made it real at the end is she said, look, I need to know your shoe size, your clothing size. We got to get a suit. There's a ton of work to do between now and tomorrow as far as the press. We got to get clothes for you. And that made it feel real. And I felt better for 5 minutes. And then a different concern came in my head. I thought, well, something's going to happen between now and tomorrow. They're going to change their mind, and they're going to do what they always do, which is fight me and win.
Yeah. But that didn't happen.
No, thank God that did not happen. No. Both sides agreed to overturn the conviction, and I was,
And they, I mean,
was released.
Based on the evidence, they didn't have. That just squashed everything, though, right? They didn't have an option besides to let you go.
Correct. That's true. Yes, that's true. Right, and then the person who did the crime, Cunningham, when the DNA matched him, he eventually worked his way around to admitting he was the one who committed the crime. I mean, he initially tried to deny it.
Yeah, but why would he do that? Because if he knew you were in there, he said he would have already said it. So, which doesn't make any damn sense.
Right.
Which just further proves he lied. He lied.
Yeah. Right. But man, I can completely understand why you just kept saying no, because how did that feel when the Innocence Project, this one group that, everybody hears about, and your story is, just wedged right into their, what they're looking for. And when they said no, it's, God love you, man. Like you said something earlier that kind of stuck in my brain about, coward not doing the suicide. It's like, no, I would say you had this undercurrent of strength, honestly, to keep going through all of this. And then you said that the Innocence Project said no. It's, the fact that you kept going through all of this, is just amazing, because I can imagine it would break most people, and your denial at the end there totally makes sense. But did it feel real, or did it take a while even after you were out for this to be like, okay, this is real, I'm actually out? Or
yes, it did. No, it did. As a matter of fact, my first words, even at the press conference, was, is this really happening? Like, I felt like I did it. Like, I finally did it. Meaning I finally managed to lose my mind, right? And at some point, I'm going to wake up from all this, and I'm still going to be in the prison cell and see the bars and the walls and everything else. Yeah. Oof. But even after that, for a long time, and by the way, I went from not knowing what to say to everything I ever wanted to say in 16 years, but could never get anyone to hear me, came out. And just when I thought I was finished, a different topic came in my head, and then another one. And before it was all said and done, I spoke for like 2.5 hours off the cuff. I held the media there. In fact, I'll tell something I haven't said before. So Barry Scheck is one of my lawyers there and my primary attorney at the Innocence Project, Nina Morrison. So at some point he scribbles out. Do you remember those small pads like this? Your homework assignment thing, a small thing, you whip it out. Mm-hmm. So he's standing next to me, and finally he opens the damn thing up and he writes on there, let's wrap it up. And so I read the thing and I made the decision. You know what, man? You're going to be on to the next case, okay? Doing press conferences, that's par for course for you. Far as I know, I'm never going to get in front of the media again. So I ignored what he wrote, and I just kept on speaking, man.
Right.
I just kept on. I kept on speaking. But there were many times, though, for a long time where it didn't feel real. I couldn't quite believe it. Other times, I felt like a metaphorical tapping on the back of your shoulder. Like if you tap someone with a finger, and hey, hey, what are you doing? Okay, you're not supposed to be out here. Okay, no one else realizes it. They're supposed to be out here. Okay, you're still supposed to be in prison. So it took a while, and other basic things like at times it felt unnatural and crazy that I had keys.
I would say the world is probably totally different.
That I'm walking around and driving. Eventually got a license and I'm moving around and like nobody's keeping track of me. There's no past. No one knows where I'm going or what I'm doing or where I'm coming back. And none of that stuff felt natural. The world was different. So cell phones, GPS, internet hadn't been created. Culture was different. The cities and towns looked different. So I felt like a fish out of water. It was awkward when I'd meet up with my extended family because they never came to see me, and the ones that did, few and far between, very sparse. There was the psychological after effects. There was the stigma. You were in prison for 16 years, but you were there. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Was it safe to be alone someplace with you? I was always passed over for gainful employment. At one point, I was a couple of weeks away from homeless shelter. I had a particularly difficult time because the years that I spent in prison, in other words, it would have been a different dynamic if I went to prison at 30 and came out at 46. But I went in when I was 17 and I was there to 32. So when I got out, I had never before lived alone. I had never before had a driver's license. I never before went shopping. I had never wrote a check. I had never had to balance a budget. So all those things made everything very difficult. Sometimes I got overwhelmed by the sheer amount of choices in a supermarket. I interpreted that as noise. And sometimes I'd have some items and I couldn't finish. But look, just push the damn cart away from me and let me leave before I get in trouble for pushing the cart away from me. And I'm going to come back and try this some other day. Or if I was out to eat with somebody, I just order, I couldn't make a decision on the menu. And so I would just say, I'll have the same thing, he's having or she's having. So It was all a lot. It was all very, very difficult.
Okay. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jukebox.
No, I mean, he literally touched base on what I was going to talk about. He was a kid going in. So like he goes home at night to his mom's house, where he lives. And now all of a sudden he's a grown adult going out there in a world that he just doesn't even know how to provide for himself, really.
Right. Absolute different stage of life.
Yeah.
Now, I have a couple questions. One is a weird question, but the main one I have right now is, so you come out, you're still kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop. You're acclimating back into the world, like you said, with the pushing the cart away and everything. In the midst of all this going on, this maelstrom of thought and sensory imagery and all these other things that are happening, is there a repeating tick in the back of your mind of, are you so grateful to be out that you're not thinking anything malicious? Or are you looking at this rogues gallery of prosecutors and judges and everything else going, vendetta? I am going to sue, come after you, get you. Like, what was that there in your mind, or you're just like, I'm out, I'm grateful, I don't even want to think about this at this point? Because I mean, I don't know because I haven't been through it, but in my mind, my human reaction would be like, I am coming after all of you legally. Don't get me wrong, not like doing something illegal. Do you know what I mean? Just like, I'm going to, as much as I can, bring the full weight of the law down on all of your heads.
Well, it was both. It was both. I was happy to be free and just appreciating, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, just to be able to sit outside at night because they make you go in the prison yard and feel the fresh air, and you can get the sunlight. And so I'm grateful to be out. I'm grateful to be free. But at the same time, there is the other element of, I'm going to bring the full weight of the law down on everyone that had a hand in what happened to me. So I did bring a civil suit. So it was both. Yeah,
Nice.
I didn't leave anybody behind.
Good.
Nobody got away.
All right. So here's my weird question for you. You said prison food was lousy. Was there an item from the prison cafeteria where you're not that you'd ever want to go back to prison, but you're like, man, this is pretty damn good?
Yeah, so believe it. So all right, so yeah, that's a good question. So I did like their tater tots and their French fries. As a matter of fact, whenever I was working, I would be assigned to give that out because I was the most experienced person on the food line. But like that was a nightmare because everybody coming through the line has the same idea. They want to get more than what the portion is they're supposed to, except that the guards and the civilians, they know that that's going on, and they're warning me, not to give more than the portion, and if they run out, they're coming to me. So you're caught in a difficult juxtaposition. And so there were other two weird items other than those two luxury items that I enjoyed that I honestly can say I haven't had as good on the outside here, as crazy as that. So I really did like the tomato soup, and I really did like the split pea soup. Not navy bean, but actual split pea. This split pea soup was very good, actually.
You're only the second person I know that likes split pea soup.
I've never had it, but now this has made me interested enough. I'm going to try some. But man, that's crazy that there's one thing where there's like a gourmet back there going, you know what?
So two items really quickly on that. So if I come across an item that was one of the horrific things on the menu, if I come across that on the menu in a restaurant, I take a fast picture of it, and I then send it to somebody that I knew from the inside that's home now. Yeah. And I always get back like a laughing face or a laugh out loud or something like that. Hey, one guy said, "Hey, I'm not ordering that. If we're together and that's I'm not ordering that." So there's that element to it. And but then the opposite direction in a way. So look, you can be a goody two-shoes in the prison, or you can break a few rules and try to slightly improve your quality of life, okay? And so I went on the black market and I bought a metal hot pot, okay, so that I could fry, so some of the delicacy meals in prison, octopus they sell cans of octopus. You have onions and garlic, and you make that with the octopus, and you put that on some rice, and you flavor the rice up with sassoon. So those prison meals, or like Jack Mac, or believe it or not, that's almost like comfort food. Like it was one of the few things that was decent. Making a self-prepared meal, would be that would be like the highlight of the month, maybe even the highlight of 2 months. So I have found myself occasionally making a couple of prison meals on the outside.
That's such a like you said, a weird question, but it's not. Like, just think about the details that you just gave us. Like, you wouldn't think about it, but mentally, yeah, you're like, man, I'm just craving this right now.
Right, right. Well, I'm thinking about having a can of octopus after this interview.
So, what did when you said you kind of had that vendetta, as we touched base on, did you get anywhere with that? I mean, did
I
anybody
did.
get charged with
No,
anything?
no, no. Nobody faced criminal charges, although they should have.
Yeah,
But they didn't, and that's unfortunately par for course.
it is.
Nobody faced any professional consequences. The most that could be said was that the so the medical examiner, when I filed the lawsuit, he suddenly retired, and then the prosecutor, 2 weeks before I came out, he suddenly retired and ran to Florida to get away from the media storm. And I did bring suit in state court, and they settled with me after 5 years. And I did bring a federal civil rights lawsuit, where the difference between the two is the federal one, you have to show that there was a malicious violation of a constitutional right that led to the wrongful imprisonment, whereas the lawsuit in state court is kind of like a no-fault insurance.
Right.
So I had 4 defendants. I settled with Westchester County because of the fraud of their medical examiner, and then City of Peekskill settled with me. The public defender's office, they settled with me. That was like a legal malpractice claim, because it was the lawyer had put in the legal aid file. He memorialized. I told him about my alibi, and it was clear he never spoke to the alibi witness. And then I went to trial against the polygraphist, and I won a jury verdict. So I didn't leave anybody behind. I won against the only one I didn't win against was the trial prosecutor, but that was because he had immunity. So the judge was constrained by the doctrine of prosecutorial immunity, which says that any misconduct by a prosecutor, if it happens after an arrest has been made, they have immunity for it.
I mean, what would they try to use that good faith argument BS?
Well, they don't. It's not even dependent on good faith. It's the theory of giving them immunity is that they're worried that they don't want a prosecutor to be looking over their shoulder over a potential lawsuit, so they want them to have it. But to me, that's BS, because look, cops don't have the immunity. They're not hindered from making arrests or doing their job. Neither do forensic scientists. I mean, it's kind of simple. Don't break the law. Don't do improper procedure. Don't run over state or federal constitutional rights, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Don't railroad an innocent 16, 17-year-old kid into the prison system just so you can check something off of your win-loss column, and obviously it benefited many people. As you said, there were promotions and other things. They should be looking over their shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
after all of this, so having this difficult time, all these challenges I mentioned, but simultaneously, I get a scholarship from Mercy College to finish the bachelor's degree, and they allowed me to live on campus, and they gave me the meal plan, and that's how I avoided the homeless shelter and how I ate. I didn't get into law school. Went to grad school. Got the master's degree. I figured, well, the extra credential would make me a better advocate, because I was simultaneously, doing advocacy work as an individual. I was speaking. I was writing a weekly column. I was doing media interviews. I was meeting with the electeds. Got the master's degree. My thesis is written on wrongful conviction causes and reforms, a criminal justice degree. Got compensated after 5 years. Used some of the money. Started the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. We have gotten 14 people home, passed 3 laws, and then another 6 as part of a coalition. And I got tired of sitting in the front row of the court. So I went to law school, became a lawyer.
Unbelievable. I mean, believable. I'm not going to say unbelievable. Believable. After all that you went through and all that you survived, I'm not shocked at all, sir. That's beautiful.
And you're doing what happened to you. Like you're helping those who are going through things that you went through.
Correct. Yes. It's it's meaningful. It's healing. It's cathartic. It's making a difference. It makes my suffering count for something. So I feel like I'm in the world to do this kind of work, and I feel like an inner peace. I'm not an angry person. I want to enjoy my life as much as I can. I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter. I've lost so much already as is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? And it's not like if I was angry, I was harming the people involved. I would really be the only loser in that scenario. So the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is take the energy I feel, I channel it into the advocacy work. And
what would you say? Would you say that because of your experiences, like reading into these cases, it's been easier for you to point out the flaws?
yes, yeah, yes, it has. But also, I mean, I've read several hundred like case summaries of people that were wrongfully convicted and exonerated, so I know the routes and the tactics and the way that the cases unfolded. So when one of my volunteer case analysts, they read the original legal stuff and they give me like a short summary. I have a form I've developed and I wrap my head around it, and then we start talking and I say, well, what about this? Or what about that? And have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And they can tell me if that's a potential, if that's viable to the case we're considering or not. And usually they go back to the drawing board once or twice, and eventually there's no more rocks we can turn up, but we know all we can know about a case. And then we ask ourselves two questions. Do we believe the innocence claim? That includes looking at what was used as evidence, and we know what the red flags are based on cases that have ended in a DNA exoneration. That an informant might be lying, or that an identification is mistaken, or that a confession is false. So we have that in mind when we're analyzing it. So we ask ourselves, like I said, do we believe in the innocence claim? And number two, do we see a potential route to victory? And only if we can say yes to both of those do we then take the case. And believe it or not, that's when the actual work on a case starts.
So, all right. Have you, in your current line of work, have you seen a case? Because to my mind, your situation, the way you were railroaded in, is particularly egregious. But have you seen a case in your current line of work where you looked at it and you're like, my God, I thought I had it bad, but like it's just exponentially worse than what you went through?
Yeah, so I had my first success as a lawyer last December. I was co-counsel to the lead attorney, Oscar Michelin. We overturned Andre Brown's wrongful conviction. Andre had been in for 23 years. So in a nutshell, Andre's trial lawyer never presented the medical evidence. So he had been shot this is a double attempted murder. Okay, so he had been shot a year before that in an unrelated incident, and therefore he could not have descended a Bronx subway, ran 4 blocks, chasing after people, shooting one person, then turning and then running another 4 or 5 blocks to shoot the other person. So his trial lawyer never presented that evidence. We found an alternative suspect who was a spitting image of Andre. They looked exactly alike. We found two witnesses who identified the alternative suspect, and he had the misfortune. Andre had the misfortune of he switched his lawyer. The lawyer he initially hired missed a couple of court appearances, because he had other cases. He had sent a partner in to sub for him. And on the third time that happened, he decided to switch the lawyer, and he had the misfortune of hiring, as far as we know, the only lawyer in American history to have entered the witness protection program, because he had been functioning as in-house counsel for the Bonanno crime family.
Oh, wow.
So so this is a 2-witness case. So one witness claimed that as he got shot, as he's falling, which the bullet severed the spinal cord, as he's falling, shot, he claims that he turned his head, which is an impossibility, and he saw him. So that's one witness. Then another witness claims that while she's parked on a street in the Bronx and at a red light, she sees one person a victim running by, and she claims that she sees him running by, putting the ski mask down. But the problem with the story is that, first of all, there is no traffic light on that street, and second of all, that's not the street where the crime happened at. It was only a couple of seconds. She waited some time before she came forward with the story, and ultimately, she never was questioned at the trial, because so she only testified at the grand jury, and somebody put a couple of bullets on her windshield when she was at court to testify at the trial. So, she no longer was willing to cooperate. And so the judge decided to let her grand jury testimony be read, which, as you both know, it's only a prosecutor at a grand jury. There's nobody questioning her at all. And so that was the evidence. Against her.
God.
Wow.
Theater of the absurd.
It is, man.
So insane. And they say truth is stranger than fiction, and I'm a fiction writer. And I will tell you some of these things I don't even know if I could imagine them happening, like to create a story such as this. Wow. You and his wow. Sorry.
What is your what is I mean, I know you've got the foundation and everything. What's your social life like now? I mean, do you have a good group of friends? Is your family back? I mean, do you want to see the family that you have that didn't?
Good question. Yeah.
All right. So I've worked really hard and, put in some significant time, and I've rebuilt relations with my extended family. I mean, I do go and make rounds periodically because, I guess that's what you're supposed to do. But honestly, I don't feel like a close relation to them. I kind of go just to go. There's not really much of a sentimental thing. I know if something happens, I really can't rely on them. But like I said, I mean, you just, so there's that. I have found it difficult to, I have found it difficult to, put my social life together again. I mean, it's I enjoy interactions with people, when they have like 3 or 4 or 5 different things in common with me, so they can change genres of activity, but it's been difficult finding that. I've found people that I have one thing in common with or another, but I mean, I like variety, and I'm eclectic, and I like to try new things, and to just get together, just keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's kind of frustrating. It's kind of boring. It's really not satisfying. And honestly speaking, I feel like that's really been a disappointment, because I really wanted more. When right. I can be by myself. I was by myself in some of the worst of times, worst of circumstances. So I can do it. It's just that's not really the quality of life that I want. So, right. It's been difficult.
In a sense, like, when you came out, did you still feel almost like you were 17 again?
I did. Yes, I did. In fact, that was even the New York Times even wrote an article, released that they're freed at 32, but feeling like 17. That is true. So I'm 50 now. I've been home for 18 years, and I feel like I'm probably like 28.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jeff, I'd tell you just from this end, I'd play Monopoly with you.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I still want to throw a ball around. I still want to go on the bumper cars, and and I wish there was a bunch of guys I could get together, and we can play a nice game of kickball, or we can shoot hoops. But it's hard. I got kind of good at basketball while I was inside, and so the challenge is actually to find people to play with and against that actually know how to play, that aren't going to hurt me without even wanting to, while on the court. So I still want to do those things, and I know look, if there were people to do it with, I would play a game of tackle football with no pads on the grass. I would still, I would still, I was, I would still do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you listen. I feel like I'd love to be able to spontaneously call somebody and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm free. Are you free?" Not literally,
Yeah.
as in free, like I'm not incarcerated, but
Yeah.
like I'm not doing anything. I'm free. You free? Let's get together. Let's do this. Let's do that. Yo, call the other people. Let's divide.
Yeah.
Let's do Let's do captains. Let's do. You remember
Right.
the one finger or two finger to see who's gonna get the first pick, and
Right.
then let's play. But yeah,
Right.
I don't have that I miss. I really miss that. I do like play. So chess and ping pong are a couple of things from the prison that I still engage in. So I learned to play ping pong and chess in prison, and I still do enjoy playing.
Nice. Ping pong. Do you use the reverse grip with a paddle with it coming down, or do you hold it standards?
I hold it standard, but I prefer to work with a stand. But I prefer to use a sand paddle. By the way,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Well, I would love to. Obviously we ain't gonna be able to do tackle football online, but
Right.
we have like 16 different shows on this network, and if
Oh
you
my
ever
God.
want to jump on, some of them
Well,
are
I want to
comedy.
go on. I want to go on all of them. I want to go on all of them if I can. I want to
Yeah.
even a comedy. I did stand up. So I went to Florida to because one of the comedians it's on Facebook. I'll plug for him. The IG the bum, Esteban Romero, who pretends to be a bum. That's his shtick and doing all these puns.
Uh-huh.
But he agreed to give me like 5 minutes of his stage time in Florida. So I went to Florida to get on stage for 5 minutes. I did other things. I have some people I know. I have some friends in Florida, so I did some other stuff. But I went there and I did my little 5 minute routine. I had a lawyer routine that I developed using some puns. So I'd go on the comedy and could do some dark humor. I laugh at myself, so I think that's part of having a good. I think that's part of having good humor. And look, and also, I'm sure you'll appreciate this as well. I do like doing dark humor as well.
That's good.
Yeah, that's the only way. That's the only way I don't lose my mind. Okay.
Right. Well, one thing that you don't know about Shank, well, you know what? Why don't you tell him, Sean?
Oh, I've been a stand-up comedian for almost 30 years. Travel all over the country doing it.
Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, that's where I was before the podcast tonight. I'm the GM of the Underground Laugh Lounge in Niles, Michigan. So I was there at a show tonight, and yeah, I love it. And when you said that you did the stand-up, that's fantastic. And I think puns are to me, the pun is the height of humor. I don't care if people groan at him. It's the best. Puns are the best.
Yeah, look, man, you gotta get me in the show at some point. I'd love to just have my face on a flyer, a promotion, even just one of the performers or something. Would love to do it. Would love to go on the other podcast.
Yeah.
Look, I do the podcast because for a number of reasons. Like a lot of things in life, more than one thing can be true at the same time. Okay,
Right.
So number one, I want to call attention to the issue of wrongful conviction. I want to hold up the work of the organization. I'm hoping that some of the people out there that are listening, I can get other media opportunities. We're always looking for donors, large, small, intermediate. Maybe some people are watching that they work at a corporation and do corporate philanthropy. I want to increase my profile even more because, I'm a tool in the struggle. So, and to some extent, as goes my organization. I do have my dream of, what if 25,000 people were willing to part with $3 to $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis. That would give us close to $1 million. Imagine how many cases we could work on if we had more personnel, more lawyers, investigators,
Right.
paralegals, other essential personnel. My ultimate dream would be to have a chapter of the foundation in each state, ultimately in each country, because I really do see this as a worldwide issue. And I think countries where we don't hear about wrongful conviction, it's not because they don't happen, it's because nobody's being exonerated. So
That's lovely.
So I always do hope that we find people for our Patreon page, and so I do it for all those reasons. And lastly, look, it's healing, and it's healing and it's cathartic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I actually agree with the cathartic part. I mean, for me, I do it because I love meeting people. Like this is.
Yeah, I'm a people
I don't.
person too, so I can appreciate that. Yeah,
I don't want to go out to a bar. I don't want to go.
right.
You know, these are things I did when I was much younger. A lot of the stuff that you didn't have the opportunity to do,
Correct.
I got out of my way when I was a lot younger, and it's just I don't want to do it. So this is fun for me. So and meeting you, people like you, I never would have met you if it wasn't for doing this kind of stuff. So I really appreciate you coming on, and I'd love to have you on several of the other shows. So
Absolutely, I'd like to make as many rounds as I possibly can. So
I don't know how you feel about conspiracy theory stuff, but Sean's got a conspiracy theory show as well.
Yeah, it's called Blurred Lines, and it's more of a what if. I tell people to do their own research, but we present evidence. And this is one of the things. I'm also a college professor. One of the things I do with the classes that I teach is every semester I present a major conspiracy theory, and one class has to be for it. Part of the class has to be for it, and the other part of the class has to be against it. And then they argue theories back and forth. And that's kind of what we do with Blurred Lines is we just look into the what ifs. And then I just like Jukebox does with Singed Eyes, I'll start dumping in, well, what do you think about this fact? It's like the moon landing. There was supposed to be 10,000 thrust, 10,000 foot-pounds of thrust coming out of the bottom of the lander, but there was no blast crater underneath it whatsoever. And they've tried to loosely explain that away multiple times, and it just sounds like you're just like, guys, come on. Like physics works everywhere. So we put things like that out there and let people make their own decisions. But it's a lot of fun. The last one we did actually that I want to continue is we were swapping ghost stories and theories on the afterlife, and did that one with Jukebox and Ev.O.Lution. Man, that I would have. Yeah. We have to do a part 2 and 3 on that thing. And
yes,
Jeff, I happy to have you along on some of those journeys.
It kind of get you out of your normal routine too.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I love new experiences, and I think that there is a lot of gains to be made when we do new things. That's part of enjoying the world. I mean, I love new places, new activities, try new food, travel. I love all those. To me, that's how you experience the world. So yeah, I think when we do get outside of our comfort zone, I mean, we do expand our mind, and we do maybe even find parts of us that we didn't even really know existed.
Right. Well, I really want to again express my appreciation for you coming on tonight. And to everybody that's tuned in, I appreciate you. I do want to kind of wrap it up as we hit this 2-hour mark.
Sure.
Is there anything that you want to say to kind of wrap up the show tonight, Jeffrey?
Sure. So if you've enjoyed the podcast tonight, please check out. There's a documentary short about me that's called Conviction, which is available on Amazon Prime. There's the website www.deskovic.org. There's a web form there. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Deskovic Foundation, Facebook, Jeffrey Deskovic. I have my public figure page, my personal page, which is public. I just copy stuff over. There's the foundation page. So, and think about word of mouth and contribute on Patreon towards freeing innocent people, and word of mouth and social media. That's all well appreciated. Sometimes people do those short birthday things, mini birthday fundraisers on Facebook, and it all adds up. So. Look, this happened to me. It could happen to anybody. That being said, I'm doing the best that I can in life, and just trying to enjoy it all. And look, track your dreams down, man. Try to work real hard and turn the dreams to reality. I think that's better than ever trying, and that's what I'm living. So
nice.
That's well said.
Yeah.
Sean, thank you for coming on. Sorry for the link issue there in the beginning.
even coming in late, man. I had an absolute blast, Jeff. It was fantastic meeting you. Thank you for sharing your story, man. This was, as tragic as it is, I think you have turned this into something beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
you too. You as well. And tell everybody we'll see you around next time. Okay.
Yes, sir.